honestly, I just want to look back and see that I made some really amazing memories. And I started doing a practice last year where I write down one or two of my favorite memories from the month. And then I got to the end of the year and I looked back. I think I had like 36 things on my list. And I was like, how do I do more of these things? So 2022 has been about creating more opportunities for some of the general areas that have showed up in my life. So 2 years from now on the personal side as well, I'd love to see that number continue to increase and me continue to lean into the things that I absolutely love and think less about some of the things that I don't necessarily love.
Welcome, everybody, back to another exciting show, the About That Wallet podcast, where we help you build strong financial behaviors. I have the opportunity to bring on a special guest by the name of Justin Lee Peters. And he has actually met this guy on FinCon, had an awesome discussion, and actually we met because we were running. And I'm sure you saw my videos on Instagram, how I was huffing and puffing and just losing the pack. Well, actually, I lost the pack because I slowed down, but it was an amazing run. And one of the cool things about Justin is that he is approaching FI, if he's not there already by the time of this episode comes out. And he's been heavily active into getting to know, taking you to that next level. And I want to thank you for coming on, Justin. So how are things with you?
Doing well, Anthony, man. And let's be honest, dude. We were all huffing and puffing out there. It was hot, dude. I did not expect it to be so humid. And I probably shouldn't say this, but honestly, just cleaned up in the bathroom and then went to FinCon right after that. Oh. But I was not anticipating how sweaty I was going to be after that run.
Yeah, and how many times y'all go around the complex?
We did twice. I think it was a little under 3 miles.
Wow. See, because like I said, I was a biker starting off. So just running is a whole nother set of muscles. So I was only able to make it to like maybe a half mile because of that first corner bend. So much humidity.
Yeah, I feel you there. Well, hey, I appreciate you having me on the show. Really excited for this conversation today.
Definitely. So, one of the things that gravitated me towards you, I've been listening to your show for a little bit. I like listening to things that like times 2.5, 3 speed. And one of the things that I love about you was that you knew where you were at that time when you started off. We called it the sandbox, and I was like, oh, that's a pretty cool thing where everybody can go play in the sandbox. And then can you talk about how you started your show, and then why you started your show just a little bit, and to kind of where you are today?
And dude, I appreciate you listening to the show and doing some of the research on the back end. I always appreciate a host that has that same degree of preparation. But yeah, so my show, The Struggle is Real, started out as the sandbox, as you mentioned, from the IT term of a place to play, to break things, to try things, all of those things. And that's where I was in my journey at that point in time. I wanted to start podcasting. It took me a little while to actually get there. But once I did, I was like, you know what, for this next year, this has got to be a complete experiment for me. This has got to be a project that I try and I learn. And if at the end of that 1 year, I'm no longer interested in podcasting, then I'd allow myself to, drop it and spend my time doing something else. Of course, long story short, I absolutely love podcasting now. I'm so deep into the space. We were talking before we press record here, podcast editing business. I co-host another podcast. I actually have a third podcast that I help a nonprofit with as well. So I am deep into the podcasting space. But this show really developed through my conversations with my little brother. We would chat like every Sunday, honestly, and he's 3 years younger than I am. He's kind of just out of college into his mid-20s. And he's asking me about all of these 20-something problems that either I had just, kind of went over or crusted, or I'm currently facing as well in my own life. And I was like, you know what, Kyle, I don't have all the answers, but I could probably find someone that we could, try to figure out some of these things together with. So the podcast ended up morphing into that. Now I call it Adulting Advice for Young Professionals, but we tackle things that we wish we would have learned in school, but no one ever put together a formal class on it.
What was because I think that's why all of us in this financial space do the same thing, because we all wish we had learned at least something when we were younger. So what was that like? What are the top three things that you can think of that you kind of wish you would have learned in the younger grades?
Budgeting, first and foremost. I know you talk about budgeting a lot, man. I think just how to manage cash in, cash out would be something that we could have a 6 month course on for sure. Like that should be a semester course. And not only like here's the right way to do it, but here are multiple ways to do it. Take the way that most makes sense to you. But managing your money is one thing that I feel like we all need, and is probably the foundation step to getting into a better relationship with personal finance. Second, investing. How do we not know how to invest? Like, why is there like so much mystery around investing? Like, what's the right stock to pick? What account do I use? Like, should I invest in a 401k? What's this thing called a Roth IRA? I have no idea. We probably should have been educated in that and really had a good game plan. And honestly, I don't know if you DIY your own investing, but I do. And I thought I was never capable of doing something like that, which is why I initially hired a financial advisor, but then realized, okay, it's actually not that hard if you just do a very simplified approach to it. And then third is probably the psychology aspect to it. Honestly, there is so much that is personal about personal finance, and it is hard. In some sense, you just need to understand who you are as a person and how that might affect some of the decisions that you're making around money. And there is no bad or wrong way around making some of these decisions. You just need to know. So I think that if I were to build a course, those three general topics would be ones that I'd really like to approach early on.
Now, I post this question, and I'm starting to hear this a lot. Is financial literacy too politicized in your eyes?
What do you mean by that?
Meaning, like, it doesn't have the same meaning as before. So, financial literacy, and it's almost like a coin term now, instead of it actually providing like money management. And I would consider, I like the term money management, but it's not as catchy as financial literacy. So, and that's where I'm looking at it as.
I don't know. I'm kind of torn on that question, honestly. I am, in one sense, maybe not politicized, but polarized by some of the financial literacy that is out there. Like there is a right or wrong way to do things. Like there is some really bad financial literacy out there, especially if you fit into this demographic of somebody that is new to financial literacy. And there are some certain things to get right first before you maybe do some of the more advanced things, and or stay away from some things, some very predatory things that I think that are out there. So I think if you are leaning, or if you are asking around that space, I definitely do think there is some politicizing in there. But I'm also surrounded by, and maybe this is why I'm a little jaded on the good side. I'm surrounded by so many great people that are wanting to educate people around financial literacy and really help them get going in their financial journey, because they realized they learned from someone and the impact that it made on them. So I don't know. Maybe I just tune everybody else out, and I have just like amazing people like yourself in my circle that I'm like, this person's doing it the right way.
Right. And that's one of the things like I gotta say, when it comes to understanding the finances, because I guess by definition, if you just look at finances and literacy, just okay, you can read money. It's like, all right, but also understanding the concepts of savings and everything like that that we mentioned, that you mentioned earlier, is now let's take this to another level. And how do we deepen and actually educate those who are looking to increase their knowledge? Um, and one of the things is that I noticed that you start talking about the strategies of finances Can you go a little bit more into what are your strategies that you utilize?
Me personally,
Yeah.
I have a very simplified approach. I love low cost index funds. I think really the only predictable unit of future success of a stock is really how much does it cost to buy that stock and how much do I have to continue to pay for it. So in terms of low cost fees, that is something that I consider a lot. I love diversification. I love it so much that I just kind of buy everything instead of buying one single thing. Lots of total US stock market funds and international funds in my portfolio. And I also believe in using tax advantaged accounts as well. First and foremost, it's getting my match through my 401k, investing into my Roth IRA, then investing into the rest into my remaining 401k. I also have an HSA in there before I really approach it from a taxable standpoint and invest into my brokerage account. And I honestly think for me, that strategy works very well. And then simplify, simplify, simplify. I touch my finances once a month, not because I probably need to touch it once a month, because I'm just excited to continue to track the progress around both the budgeting aspect and my investments. But I honestly think a lot of it, instead of adding more strategy to it, you should be simplifying the strategy that you're currently taking with money.
I like that. Now, it's interesting that you go that route because most of the time, like, in this financial space, everybody keeps saying, well, why don't you invest in Roth first and then your traditional savings? Is there any reason why you do the opposite?
So I do. So I do invest in Roth first. Well,
Okay.
I take my 401k, I take my match through my 401k first.
Right.
And then, which is actually your match will come in as a traditional, and then my contributions will come in as Roth. And I don't know if we need to break down that. I'm sure you've covered that pretty extensively on the show here. Then I invest into my HSA. I just think triple tax advantage there. It can go in tax deferred. It can come out tax advantage as well if it's for qualified medical expenses, which I'll have plenty of those. I've broken like 7 bones in my life, so I can rack up some medical expenses, and then I go invest in my Roth IRA. And honestly, I have a Roth 401k as well. I'm someone that's like, rather than trying to predict where taxes are going to be in the future, I'm just going to take the hit right now, so it's a little bit more predictable for me. What do you do?
Me personally, I do the full traditional, and then I start focusing on the Roth. So
Okay.
I'm able to max out the traditional, because for the tax purposes, mainly because of the business side of the house, it's a little
Yeah.
kind of get the traditional out the way, and then the Roth comes in a little bit after. But because the way how I'm filing, and according to the tax lady that I have on the show often, she was saying is that I'm usually missing out on funding because I file married filing separately. And because I'm married filing separately, I cannot take advantage of the Roth. So
Why so?
according to the IRS, I have to make less than $10,000 a year in order for me to contribute to my Roth IRA. Even though I can contribute, but it doesn't do anything for me anyway.
I would challenge you to look into that. I'm pretty sure the
I was
there is no, I don't think there is any income limit on Roth, but there is an income limit on traditional IRAs, and I think it's like 144,000 or something ridiculous like that.
right. Well, with the Roth, I was going up and down on the thing, but usually it's because of the way how you file your taxes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing. But I mean, technically, I could still do it. They're not going to know. Well, they always know.
Yeah.
So, but
and I'm not your financial advisor. Let's get that out of the way. But for me, in a general sense, if you're in a low tax bracket right now, I think Roth makes more sense than traditional, just because you might as well pay the taxes, considering that you're in a low tax bracket right now, assuming you're not in your highest earning years as of right now as well. Like for me personally, I invest in a Roth because I'm predicting that I'm going to be in a higher tax bracket down the road, not only because tax rates might go up, but also I believe my income is probably got to be going up pretty substantially over the next 10 plus years. Being 29 years old still, I hope that I'm at the beginning of my income generating journey, not necessarily at the crest of it moving downward.
Got you. That is one way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, because we got to make finances personal again.
Yeah.
And because that's one of the things I've been going back and forth on. But, this is work. So let's talk about your like how we were actually diving into the podcast arena and making that work-life balance. So how are you making that work with the podcast? You got your girlfriend, and then also you have your 9 to 5.
Yeah. So I got the 9 to 5, the podcast editing business, 3 podcasts that I host or co-host, a girlfriend. I also want to work out and maintain somewhat of a sense of healthiness in my life. It's a lot. Not to say that it's not any more or less than so many other people listening as well. I'm not a parent, and I couldn't imagine also trying to do everything that I'm doing right now and being a parent. So I think it's all about balance. It's honestly, I've been fortunate to bring some really amazing people into my life as well. My little brother being one of them, and he's helped a lot on the editing aspect, and he's my co-founder in our business as well. Krista Edwards, who co-hosts Ready to Roth with me, she picks up a lot of slack for me in that arena. So building out a good team behind you, I think, is important. But honestly, it's managing my energy levels from a week to week basis, not even time management, but energy management, knowing the fluxes. Maybe my 9 to 5 is barking at me a little bit more at one season of life versus another season of life. And then you got to dial down the other things to, crank up some energy and time that you're going to put into the 9 to 5, vice versa. I'm launching this podcast editing business right now as well. It needs a lot of my time and attention. Some other things might dial down because of that. And it's checking in with yourself on a routine basis to make sure, am I still at the right level in all of these? But honestly, man, it is hard. It is hard. I have an ever growing to-do list, and I wish I could do more and more. But you also just got to be proud of all the progress that you're currently making as well. So I think it's a little bit of a balance.
I like that, because one of the things that I had as a takeaway from FinCon was the last lady, Bernadette Joy. Mm-hmm. And she mentioned talking about limiting your time. And that's one of the first things that I did when I left there, was actually limit my time to only record Fridays and Saturdays. So that freed up the rest of the week to allow me to edit. I also co-host on another podcast on Sundays, and then I also do a live show every Wednesday. So having those limitations actually allowed me to free up more time to do all the fun things. And I would have to say that I would share that to all the listeners here, is to really limit your time, limit your availability, because you'll be surprised on once you set up those boundaries, how life can really be. So
yeah, you definitely got to set up boundaries too. I mean, there are 2 nights a week for sure at 5:30. I'm done with work and I'm going to go hit the rock climbing gym. I'm going to spend some time with friends. I'm going to climb. I'm going to enjoy whatever night that is. Sundays for me too, I call them selfish Sundays. I do whatever I want to do. I'm not going to shame myself if I want to get into work that day. I'm not going to shame myself if I want to sit around and binge all the new Game of Thrones. Like it is like I can do whatever I want with my Sunday. It helps re-energize me. And then usually Monday morning, I'm ready, feet hit the ground. I'm ready to like rock and roll.
Nice. So let's dive a little bit more into your story again. Because you were talking about reaching 5, but also taking a sabbatical. For those who not familiar, can you just bring up, what is a sabbatical?
Yeah. A sabbatical is it is a time that you've intentionally set aside to not work. And you might define work in whatever capacity. I felt like I did do work during then, but it was all fun. I was launching my podcast, but I walked away from my 9 to 5 at that time. And to give a little bit of context to that, I was working for an employer for 7.5 years, and I just got caught up, and I just wasn't really excited about what I was doing anymore. I made a quick jump to a different employer, and I quickly realized that was not the right fit for me. I probably knew it, or I I admitted it to myself 3 months in. I probably knew it 3 weeks in to that job. I ended up staying around for 5 months and got some really timely advice from a recruiter. And he said, Justin, well, I was kind of going through this whole thing of like, oh, I need to make it to the 1 year mark so I don't have the blemish on the resume, blah, blah, blah. Like, and this guy just like challenged me. And I'm so glad he did. He's like, are you really got to waste another 7 months of your life just to hit this status quo of having to work at an employer for 1 year? He's like, what, do you really want to do that? I was like, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to do that at all. I can't imagine myself here for 7 more months, let alone 7 more days. So, but I didn't really know where I wanted to go. And he's like, didn't you mention you had some money sitting around? Like you've saved up money. I was moving from St. Louis to San Diego. I saved up money then. I thought I was also going to be off work at that time. So I saved up some extra money. But I ended up actually working in a remote capacity. So I never lost my job. And I was like, yeah, I have some money. He's like, go take some time off then, man. Like go work on something that you've always wanted to work on, but you never felt like you had time to do it because you had a job. And then don't think about work for 3 months. Like take a sabbatical. And that was the first time it registered for me. I was like, I could take a sabbatical. Cool. So that's what I went. It was January 2020. I left that employer, claimed that I was going to take a sabbatical. I kind of had a 6-month plan in place. Of course, that plan flipped upside down because March of 2020, everybody knows what happened, but that's okay. Travel canceled. One thing I did do was start the Struggles Real podcast, and I'm so glad I did. I got to invest so much time into it. It was like my baby. It was my purpose and my fulfillment during all of this period of life. And then whenever I did rejoin the workforce 7 months later, I had a sense of identity outside of my career. Like I was a podcaster too. Like I had something else to like wake up for and get excited for. I had another area that was filling my cup, that was introducing me to new people, that was engaging my learning aspect. It wasn't just my career that I put up on a pedestal, that I had to do all of these things. And honestly, it has been such an uplift for my career as well. And it can be truly just that. It could be the primary modality of how I make money. But also if it does some of these other things, great. But it doesn't have to do all of these things because I have podcasting and I love podcasting.
That's awesome. So during your journey of podcasting, we all talked about the financial independence side of the house. Is it approachable and obtainable for anybody?
I don't think it's a scam. I'll take a hard stance on that. I think financial independence is attainable for almost everybody. I want to put a caveat on there. Like it might be challenging for many, many people. But I do think it is attainable for many. I think it's even more obtainable for most people, and they don't even realize that. I think there's like the simple equation. Do you follow Jeremy Schneider from Personal Finance Club?
No, I don't.
You should. His Instagram account is amazing. He's also a frequent guest on podcasts, so people can just search Jeremy Schneider. But he has this concept. I think it was like 10 years to FI, like how essentially the 2-step approach to FI, and how to hit FI in 10 years. And it's essentially spend half of your money and save and invest the other half. And that's really all you need to do for 10 years. And of course, depending on where you're at and the market timeline and what you're investing in, et cetera, like there can be some variations. But if it's 8 years, if it's 15 years, whatever, like we'll put a little bit on there. Retiring, not having to work for 40 plus years, I'll take even 25, 30 years in that sense. As of right now, I'm on the path to hit FI, hopefully before 40. I have a little over a $250,000 invested in terms of net worth right now. A lot of that is just doing the work for itself right now. I mean, maybe in this last couple of months, we've seen the market downturn. I'm trying to keep pace and continuing to fund that to stay at a level. But last year, like it was rocking. Like I was, making money just off of my investments year over year, let alone what I was actually contributing to these funds as well. And I didn't really start that process until maybe 3 years ago. So continuing to do that, of course, you can have whatever saving or whatever investing percent and savings percentage as you want there. And, the higher the percentage, the faster you're going to potentially get to FI. But I know you've talked about the 25x rule on there. Essentially, it's just 25x your expenses. Once you get to that number, you're quote, in financial independence. And then you can decide what you want to do with your time around at that point in time, because hopefully your investment should be making enough money and you can siphon off that money so that you can fund your lifestyle. And then you can go and spend your time, what would normally be your 9 to 5, doing whatever you want to do. But what are your thoughts? Are you taking a more aggressive stance on the fact that it might be a scam?
Well, for me, I think it is approachable in a 10-year span because I did hear that as well from Jeremy. I know he was a guest on somebody else's. Now, once you mentioned the 10-year thing, I was like, okay, that's where I heard it from. Because I think I was listening to Bigger Pockets, I guess more likely he's been a frequent guest on there. Um, and so being for it itself to be a scam, I would say it's a scam only if you believe it to be. For the individual that don't see themselves being into that arena. And that's the only reason why I would see that it's not attainable for everyone. And is it something that we, as educators inside the financial space, can try to bring light to say, yes, it is obtainable for you, and here's how. Or here are these different strategies that these other people have used. And I think that's the beauty of what we have is a podcast and a platform that people can actually tune into to try to find a way to provide extra strategies or additional resources for them to see themselves as financially independent. I think they would say, I think Dave Ramsey talked about it a lot, was saying is that by the time you retire, you should actually, the whole purpose of retirement is to be financially independent. But people never really reach retirement. By age wise, life happens, but for the typical American that's saving up, doing what they're supposed to do, if you pay off your house in 30 years, you've been working for 30 plus years for their retirement age, technically you should have financial independence. But the 10-year mark, I truly believe it. And the best way to do it that way is by investing. And so that's one of the things that I believe that is doable. But I would say the people that agree that it is a scam, it's just on self belief and self worth.
I agree. I mean, I pulled open a compound interest calculator right here. I think NerdWallet has a great one. And initial deposit of $100, monthly contributions of $350, which I get that could be a lot for somebody to be investing $150 or $350 a month over a 40-year time span, estimating a 7% return on average. The markets return like 11.2 with minus 3% for inflation. So honestly, I think we're even under predicting this a little bit. But you do that for 40 years and you have $930,000. That's right there. That's a lot of money for retirement if need be. I mean, that's almost a 40 grand salary right there off of that. You can start playing with these numbers a little bit. I mean, if I bump it up to $500 a year or $500 a month, which is $6,000 a year, which is essentially like maxing out your Roth right now, your Roth IRA, you're now at $1.3 million. And let's just say we're trying to hit $1 million. We can scale that back. I mean, you're looking at now 36 years to do that. Like, it's very approachable. If I'm a 21-year-old starting this journey, that puts me at, what is that? 56, 57, 57 years old, 7 years earlier than that. We're not even talking about a 401k match in here as well. Right. And if you continue to increase your earnings and continue to contribute a little bit more, I mean, you could see how it's very approachable for some people.
Definitely. And hopefully you are switching jobs at least twice, maybe 3 times in 10 years.
And you don't have to switch jobs. You could just negotiate your salary. Like you could have you should have a routine practice of negotiating on an annual basis. I do think you should advocate for yourself, regardless if you are at an employer your entire career lifetime, or if you switch employers every other year or something. Like, you have the capacity to negotiate no matter what you are. And your best negotiation, your best leverage for negotiation is continuing to be a top performer, because employers want to keep their top performers around. So if you want to continue to get raises, ask for them and be a top performer. Be a reason to say yes.
I like that. That might be the show topic. Be a
Don't get me started. I've been thinking about negotiation a lot recently. It's just something I've been excited about. I've been asked about it a lot. It's probably my most frequently asked question in the career space of my podcast. But honestly, that of course that bleeds over to money as well. I get a lot of how do I start investing questions on the money side. So it might jockey for 1 and 2 around there. But honestly, it's just half the battle is just asking. It's just getting the nerves to like go in there and just say, like, hey, like, do you have any flexibility in raises this year? I would love to get a higher raise than I got last year. And this is why I believe I should get a raise. And then you lay out the 3 things that you've accomplished over the year that have been substantial to the business. So, I mean, it can be as simple as that. And I see you got Never Split the Difference behind you too. That's a great one as well.
The book that I'm looking for is by Ken Coleman, because he talks about that, about the art of, I want to call it the art of negotiation. But that's not his title of the book. It's the proximity principle. And what he's talking about in that process is how to negotiate your terms. So you see that you're providing so much value, and you talk to the supervisor, just sit down and say, hey, what is it that you need, or what are the problems or issues that you can't get to? How can I assist you? All right, cool. Now let's come back in 3 weeks or 3 months to say, now that I've accomplished everything that you wanted me to do to kind of reach that next level, now can we start talking about this raise here? And he walks you through that full process. So I actually like that approach. Because it sets you apart from everyone else. You're actually taking a step forward, asking the right questions, and really want to help out the business.
Agreed.
Yeah. So let's move on down to the third segment of the show, which is the features. And this is the one that I love because just about every person that's been on the show have reached their 2-year goal within a matter of 6 months. So I want to ask you, what is in store for Mr. Peters in the next 2 years?
Man, there's so many things that are coming to mind right now.
Spit them out. Let's go.
Podcasting wise, I have a number in mind for monthly listeners, and I would love to see that happen in 2 years. And I do think that could be one of those things that does happen sooner than I think happens.
What's that number?
I want to get to 5,000 monthly listeners on the podcast. Okay. Just from a vanity metric standpoint, if it hits or not, it's not going to prevent me from continuing to produce content. We know that as podcasters, we love to do what we do. We don't do it because of all the glory and fame. People don't know Anthony, the great podcaster out there. And honestly, there are only a handful of podcasters out there that might get noticed on the streets, regardless of how big their show is. I mean, Joe Rogan, maybe a Tim Ferriss, but they also have some endeavors outside of that as well. I would love to also find some more clarity in my career and business as well. I would like to understand where I'm headed in that direction, which is a little bit of a more fuzzier goal for me, for sure. And honestly, I just want to look back and see that I made some really amazing memories. And I started doing a practice last year where I write down 1 or 2 of my favorite memories from the month. And then I got to the end of the year and I looked back. I think I had like 36 things on my list. And I was like, how do I do more of these things? So 2022 has been about creating more opportunities for some of the general areas that have showed up in my life. So 2 years from now on the personal side as well, I'd love to see that number continue to increase and me continue to lean into the things that I absolutely love and think less about some of the things that I don't necessarily love.
I like that. And so for those of you who are listening, make sure you go head on over and subscribe to our show now. Before we get to these final 4 questions, you ready for the final 4?
Let's do it.
All righty. What does wealth mean to you?
Wealth. I think the easy and cop out answer is freedom. I think a lot of people, whenever I talk to them about wealth and FI people in general, they talk about the freedom of choice that wealth brings. I would love to give you a different answer than that, but I also agree that's probably how I define wealth. I mean, if you're wealthy monetarily, but all of your time is monopolized due to that wealth, how wealthy are you? If you're wealthy on paper, but you don't have health, you don't have relationships, how wealthy really are you? So I think the freedom of choice and leaning into the things that really bring me joy, going back to how I just answered the other question there too, would be how I define wealth.
I like it. Well, I mean, like I said, it's how you feel wealth is important to you. That's really cool. Number 2, what was your worst money mistake?
Oh gosh. Not hiring a financial advisor, but listening and not challenging some of the advice that he gave me. Not only was he really not a financial advisor and more so an insurance salesman, I listened and I bought an insurance product from him that made no sense in my current investing journey. Buying a whole life insurance policy at that point in time, looking back and reading the policy and understanding the fee structure, I didn't do enough of my own education and my own challenging to make an educated decision in that. And instead, I allowed somebody else to make that decision for me. That would probably be my biggest money mistake.
All right, this is a side question because I want to dive into that just a little bit more because a lot of people say that they don't want to be told what to do with their money, but some people need that structure. How do you provide that structure to them?
I do. I don't necessarily want to provide structure, but I want to provide education. And I think everybody has the responsibility to seek education and to consume education and then to lean on people for advice around the structure. I will share with you how I do money, but that might not make the most sense for you either. So I think educating yourself is first and foremost, and then seeking advice. But then you got to come back to yourself and ask yourself, does that make sense for my situation? But like I said, if you have some trusted individuals and you really think that they have your best bet and you're not sure what to do, but you've gotten a little bit of education, you honestly just got to pull the trigger sometimes and realize, oh, I'm headed down that path now. Because, even hiring the financial advisor, regardless of him selling me that product, he led me on my financial journey that I'm on right now and helped me get started on investing 2 years prior than I probably would have. So was that really a mistake, having and engaging in that relationship with him? No. So if you're at a place where you just really don't have the energy and time to invest into the education in the space right now, sometimes leaning on somebody else isn't a terrible idea. Just be careful who it is.
Not a random guy on YouTube.
Exactly. But hey, if they watch enough of your videos and they feel what you're saying and they get to know and trust you, that's the beauty of podcasting as well. I mean, the amount of relationships that I built with people that I've never got to meet before, that I probably never even said hi to before, but they trust and value my opinion. Great. I love that. And hopefully, and I take a lot of, I realize that people are listening and are educating themselves. Therefore, I have responsibility to vet the guests that I'm having on, to make sure what they're saying is factual, to make sure that I am bringing quality content to them. So that's you and I as podcasters. We take on that responsibility, make sure that we take ownership for that.
Definitely. Yeah, that's the beauty of editing. Gotta love
Yes.
it. Let's see. Question number 3. What is your favorite financial or non-financial book?
Favorite financial book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Rumi Sethi. Kind of basic foundation book. I absolutely love it. I picked that one up and that ignited my interest in learning more and more about personal finance. And I love his no nonsense approach to it, his DIY approach to it. He really made me feel empowered about all of it. So if you haven't read that book yet, pick that book up. Non-financial, I'll even go non-fiction as well. Time Traveler's Wife is a book that I've read twice, and I haven't read that many books twice. And from like a random rom-com, like I'm not somebody that reads a lot of fiction in general, but for some reason I read that book one time and I absolutely fell in love with it. I like kind of the back and forth of the whole timeline and the story, so I dig it. I also read what was that book? The Giver. Uh, they made it into a movie as well. I read The Giver when I was like in either grade school or middle school. I can't remember, but I reread that just because I was disengaged with reading. So I picked up something that I thought that I'd really love again that would bring some nostalgia. And I absolutely loved The Giver. So I think I threw three choices at you, but those would be three things on my mind.
Yeah, and it looked like The Time Traveler's Wife is a romance season.
It is. Yeah. It is, which is like not, like I said, not my cup of tea in terms of books I pick up. My girlfriend's like deep into the romance novel thing, and I don't find any of them entertaining whatsoever. But for some reason, I really like that book. Like, you guys can blast me for it, but that's cool.
So the last question, well, the final fourth question is, what is your favorite dish to make?
I last year made a ground beef ramen, super easy, like ramen noodles, bunch of like kind of stir fry veggies, ground beef cooked, obviously, put it all together. I make this kind of special sauce for it, put a little sriracha on top. I love that. But honestly, I don't do a ton of cooking, especially when my girlfriend's around. She's a music photographer. So if she's not on tour, she's usually back home and she doesn't have a whole lot to do. And she loves cooking. So favorite dish would probably be anything that she makes.
Safe answer. Awesome. So Justin, I have the very last question here, which is, where could people find out more about you?
The Struggle is Real with Justin Peters on probably whatever podcast player you're listening to this on right now. We're also on YouTube if you want to check it out there as well. I put up a lot of time and effort into creating good quality content. My brother is an amazing editor on the back end as well. We're really proud about the content that we're making out there. So I would love it if you just went, checked us out, look at the last 5 episodes that we've made, pick one topic that really resonates with you, give it a download, listen to it. If you hate it, stop there. If you love it, follow, and you can check out all the content in the future.
All right, Justin. Well, it was a pleasure having you on the show, providing so much information around the finances, the mindset, and also where you want to take yourself, and as well as the business. So thank you again. And definitely we might have to link up a little later to talk about this rock climbing and running situation.
Let's do it, man. Right. Anthony, pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Once again, I appreciate your diligence with the preparation for this conversation. There are very few podcasters that actually do that. So hat tip to you. You're making some really great stuff here.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Y'all be safe. I'm out. Peace.